The night shift at Buckingham Palace was always quiet. Too quiet. But on the evening of November 14th, Royal Guard Thomas Bennet heard something he would never forget. It was just past midnight when the sound echoed through the stone corridors. A faint scraping. Metal against stone. Coming from somewhere below his feet, Thomas had worked palace security for 9 years. He knew every creak, every echo, every shadow. This was different. This was new. He stood perfectly still in the East Wing hallway, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The sound came again, definitely from below. From the basement levels that most guards never visited, his hand moved to his radio, then stopped. What would he even say? That he heard a noise? They would think he was imagining things. No. He needed to check this himself first. The basement entrance was hidden behind a maintenance door near the old servant quarters. Thomas pushed it open slowly. The hinges groaned. Beyond it, stone steps descended into darkness. He clicked on his flashlight. The beam cut through the blackness, revealing ancient brick walls covered in decades of dust. His boots echoed on each step as he went down. The air grew colder, damper. It smelled of old stone and something else. Something metallic. At the bottom of the stairs, a long corridor stretched in both directions. Thomas had been down here once before, years ago, during a training exercise. Storage rooms, mostly. Old furniture. Forgotten pieces of royal history. But tonight, something was different. A light. Faint and flickering. Coming from the far end of the left corridor, Thomas's heart began to pound. No one should be down here at this hour. No one had authorization. He moved forward carefully, keeping his flashlight low. His training kicked in. Stay alert. Stay ready. Every sound mattered now. The corridor seemed to stretch forever. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. His shadow danced on the walls. As he got closer, he could see the light was coming from beneath a door. Not just any door. This one looked older than the others. Heavy oak with iron hinges. The kind of door that had been there for centuries. Thomas reached for the handle. It was cold under his palm. He took a breath and pushed. The door swung open. What he saw inside made him freeze. The room was larger than he expected. Stone walls lined with wooden shelves. But it wasn't the size that shocked him. It was what filled the space. Documents. Hundreds of them. Scattered across tables, pinned to boards, stuffed into folders. Photographs, too. Recent ones, and right there on the center table. Illuminated by a single desk lamp was a file folder marked with the royal seal. Before you hear what was inside that folder, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We bring you the most unbelievable true stories every week. Hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss what happens next. Thomas stepped closer to the table. His hands were shaking as he reached for the folder. Inside were personnel records, staff assignments, security clearances. But these weren't just any staff members. Every single document was related to one person's household, Camilla's staff, the Queen Consort's entire team, their schedules, their backgrounds, their private phone numbers. Even their family information. Thomas felt his stomach drop. This wasn't normal. This wasn't authorized. Someone had been collecting information. Detailed information. Secret information, but why? And who? He picked up another file. Inside were photographs. Surveillance photos. Members of Camilla's staff entering buildings, meeting with people, going about their daily lives. Someone had been watching them. For how long? Thomas's radio crackled suddenly. He jumped, nearly dropping the file. Bennett, status check. East Wing, come in. His hand moved to respond, then hesitated. If he reported this now, the room would be flooded with people. Evidence might disappear. Whoever was behind this might be warned. He needed more information first. All clear. Continuing rounds, the radio went silent. Thomas set down the file and looked around the room more carefully. There had to be more. Something that would explain this. That's when he saw it in the corner. Partially hidden behind a stack of boxes was another door, a smaller one. almost invisible in the shadows, and it was slightly open. Thomas walked toward it slowly. His pulse hammered in his ears. Every instinct told him to call for backup. But curiosity pushed him forward. He reached the door and pushed it wider. Inside was a smaller room, more like a closet, but the walls were covered in something that made his blood run cold. Maps. Detailed maps of the palace. Every room, every corridor, every entrance and exit. And marked in red ink were specific locations. Camilla's private chambers. Her office. Her daily routes through the palace. Someone wasn't just watching her. Staff. They were planning something. Thomas stared at the maps, his mind racing. Red circles marked meeting times. Notes scribbled in the margins. Someone had been tracking Camilla's movements for weeks, maybe months. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his supervisor. "Everything okay on rounds?" Thomas typed back quickly. "Yes. All quiet." He was lying. But he needed time to think. He took photos of everything with his phone. The documents, the surveillance pictures, the maps, evidence. If this room suddenly disappeared, he would have proofed. As he photographed the last map, something fell from behind it. A small notebook. Black leather, worn at the edges. Thomas picked it up and flipped it open. The handwriting inside was neat, precise. Every page was dated. Every entry detailed. November 3rd, subject arrived at 9:47 a.m. Met with household manager. Departed 11:20 a.m. November 5th, subject changed security detail. New guard assigned. Name, Crawford. November 8th, subject received package from external source. Contents unknown. The entries went back months. Whoever wrote this had been watching Camilla's staff obsessively, recording their every move, but the most disturbing part was the latest entry. November 14th. Final preparations complete. Window of opportunity confirmed. Tomorrow evening? That was less than 24 hours away. Thomas felt ice in his veins. This wasn't just surveillance. This was a countdown. He needed to report this. Now. But to whom? If someone inside the palace had access to this room, had time to set all this up, they might have connections. They might be warned before action could be taken. He tucked the notebook into his jacket and moved back into the main room. He started gathering the most important documents, the ones that showed clear evidence of planning. That's when he heard footsteps. Someone was coming down the corridor. Thomas clicked off his flashlight and pressed himself against the wall. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might give him away. The footsteps grew closer. Slow, deliberate. Not. The walk of someone on patrol. The walk of someone who knew exactly where they were going. A shadow appeared in the doorway. A figure in dark clothing. Not a palace uniform. Thomas held his breath. The figure stepped into the room and went straight to the center table. They moved with confidence. Familiar. They'd been here many times before. In the dim light from the desk lamp, Thomas could finally see their face. His blood turned to ice. It was someone he knew. Someone from the palace staff. A woman named Victoria Hayes. She worked in the household coordination office. He'd seen her dozens of times. Always polite. Always professional. And right now, she was destroying evidence. Victoria grabbed files and shoved them into a bag. She moved quickly, efficiently, like she'd practiced this. Thomas knew he had seconds to make a decision. Confront her now, or let her leave and follow her. Find out if she was working alone. Before he could choose, Victoria's phone rang. She answered immediately. Yes. A pause. Her body tensed. What do you mean someone was here? Her voice sharp now, worried. Thomas's stomach dropped. How did they know? The lamp was moved, Victoria said into the phone. And documents are out of order. She spun around, scanning the room. Her eyes swept past Thomas's hiding spot. Someone's been in this room, she said quietly. Recently, The voice on the other end said something Thomas couldn't hear. Victoria's expression changed. Fear mixed with determination. "Then we move up the timeline," she said. "Tonight, we do it tonight." She ended the call and grabbed the rest of the files. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Her head turned slowly toward the corner where Thomas hid. "I know you're there," she said calmly. "I can hear you breathing." Thomas had no choice now. He stepped out of the shadows, his hand moving to his radio. Victoria held up her phone. On the screen was a live video feed. Multiple angles, multiple rooms. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she said. "Look at screen 3. Thomas looked. His heart stopped. It was his daughter's bedroom. The camera showed her sleeping peacefully in her bed at home. "You have a beautiful family, Thomas," Victoria said softly. "It would be a shame if anything happened to them." The room seemed to spin. His daughter was 8 years old. His wife was probably asleep beside her. "What do you want?" Thomas managed to say. "I want you to forget you saw this room. Forget you saw me. Go back to your rounds and stay out of my way." "I can't do that," Victoria sighed. "I hoped you'd be reasonable. Some of the others, they understand. They know when to look the other way. Others." Thomas felt sick. "Who else is involved? Enough people that you can't win this fight." Victoria moved toward the door. "You have a choice, Thomas. Your family's safety or your loyalty to people who don't even know you exist." She was almost out the door when Thomas spoke again. "What are you planning? What happens tonight?" Victoria paused. For a moment, something crossed her face. Regret, maybe? Or doubt? "Something that should have happened a long time ago," she said quietly. "Sometimes the only way to protect the crown is to remove those who threaten it." Then she was gone. Her footsteps echoed down the corridor and faded into silence. Thomas stood alone in the secret room, his phone full of evidence and his heart full of fear. He looked at the documents still scattered on the table. The maps on the wall. The countdown that had just become urgent. Victoria and whoever she worked with were planning something tonight. Something targeting Camilla's staff. Maybe targeting Camilla herself. And they had his family in their sights. Thomas pulled out his phone and stared at it. One call could bring help. Could stop whatever was about to happen. But that same call might cost him everything. The faces of his wife and daughter flashed through his mind. His daughter's laugh. His wife's smile. Everything he'd ever worked to protect. But then he thought of the people sleeping upstairs in the palace. Unaware that danger was creeping through the basement corridors. Unaware that tomorrow had become tonight. Thomas made his decision. He pressed a number on his phone. Not his supervisor. Not palace security. Someone else. Someone outside the system. Asterisk, the phone rang 3 times before a tired voice answered. "Marcus, it's Thomas Bennett. I need your help." Marcus Cole had been Thomas's training officer years ago before retiring from palace security. Now he worked as a private security consultant. More importantly, he still had connections. The kind that operated outside official channels, Thomas. "It's past 1 in the morning. What's wrong?" "I can't explain over the phone. Can you meet me now?" There was a pause. Marcus knew Thomas well enough to hear the urgency. "Where?" "The old chapel garden. 30 minutes. And Marcus, come alone. Trust no one from the palace." Thomas ended the call before Marcus could ask more questions. He took one last look around the secret room, then left, pulling the door closed behind him. As he climbed back up to the main level, his mind worked through the problem. Victoria had people inside the palace. People who looked the other way. That meant palace security was compromised. He couldn't trust the normal chain of command. But Victoria had made a mistake. She'd shown him the surveillance feed of his home, which meant she needed it actively monitored, which meant someone was watching it. Right now, someone he could track down. Thomas walked through the palace corridors with practiced calm. To anyone watching, he was just another guard on rounds. But his eyes scanned every corner, every shadow. Looking for signs of Victoria's network, he reached the staff. Kitchen and ducked inside. Empty. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to his wife. "Wake up. Take Sophie and go to your sister's house. Right now. Don't pack. Don't turn on lights. Just go. I'll explain later. I love you. He knew she'd panic. Knew she'd have questions. But she'd also trust him. They'd talked about this once years ago. A code word for emergencies. If he ever said the words, your sister's house, she would know to act without questions. His phone buzzed almost immediately. Leaving now. Be safe. Thomas exhaled. At least his family would be out of reach. For now, he checked his watch. 20 minutes until he met Marcus. He needed to use that time wisely. The surveillance feeds had to be monitored from somewhere. Victoria couldn't watch them from her phone constantly. There had to be a control room. Another hidden space. Thomas thought back to the palace layout. The basement was old, built centuries ago. But surveillance systems were modern. They needed power. They needed internet connections. The server room? It had been upgraded 2 years ago to handle the palace's digital security systems. If Victoria had people on the inside, they could have hidden additional equipment there. Thomas moved quickly through the corridors, his route taking him toward the technical wing. This area was always quiet at night. Just a skeleton crew of IT staff. The server room door required a security card. Thomas swiped his. The light flashed green dot inside. The room hummed with the sound of cooling fans and electrical equipment. Rows of server racks lined the walls, their lights blinking in the darkness. At first everything looked normal. Then Thomas noticed something odd. One of the racks in the back corner had a padlock on it. None of the others did. He approached slowly, examining it. The lock was new. Heavy duty? Not standard palace equipment. Thomas pulled out a multi-tool from his belt. His training had included basic lockpicking. He'd never thought he'd use it inside the palace itself. The lock clicked open. After 2 minutes of careful work, behind the rack door was exactly what he'd feared. Additional equipment, unauthorized servers, and multiple monitors showing live feeds. Dozens of them. Not just his home. Other homes too. Staff members, guards, people throughout the palace and beyond. Thomas felt sick. This network was massive. One monitor in particular caught his attention. It showed Camilla's private study. The camera angle was perfect, capturing the entire room. A sticky note was attached to the monitor's frame. Just 2 words. Tomorrow, 9 p.m. No, not tomorrow. Tonight. Victoria had moved up the timeline. Thomas pulled out his phone and photographed everything. The equipment, serial numbers, the feed locations, all of it. Then he heard voices in the corridor outside. He switched off his flashlight and closed the rack door, leaving the padlock hanging open. He pressed himself behind a large server unit just as the door opened to people entered. One was Victoria. The other was a man Thomas didn't recognize. Tall, thin, wearing a maintenance uniform. Everything's set, the man said. The device is in place. 9 o'clock tonight, just like you wanted? And you're sure it's untraceable? Victoria asked. Completely. It'll look like a malfunction. Tragic but accidental. Device. Malfunction. The words made Thomas's blood run cold. What about the guard who found the room? The man asked. Handled. He has too much to lose. He won't talk. Thomas watched from his hiding spot, barely breathing. Victoria walked to the equipment rack. She saw the open padlock immediately. Her body went rigid. Someone's been here. She spun around, scanning the room. Recently? The man pulled out a weapon. Not a gun. Something smaller. A taser. Search the room, Victoria ordered. Thomas had seconds. The server rack he hid behind was large, but not large enough if they searched thoroughly. He did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed a heavy power cable from the floor and yanked it hard. Half the server room went dark. Alarms began blaring throughout the building. In the confusion, Thomas bolted for the door. He heard Victoria shout behind him, but he was already in the corridor. He ran. His feet pounded against the palace floors. Behind him, more shouts. They were coming after him. Thomas burst through an emergency exit into the cold night air. The chapel garden was 200 yards away. He could see the old stone building in the moonlight. A figure stood waiting in the shadows. Marcus Thomas sprinted across the grass. His lungs burned. His heart hammered. He was almost there when he heard the footsteps behind him. Close. Too close. Thomas threw himself forward, tackling Marcus to the ground just as something whistled over their heads. "What the hell is going on?" Marcus demanded. Thomas pulled him behind a stone wall. They were both breathing hard. "There's a plot," Thomas gasped out. "Inside the palace, they're planning something tonight. 9 p.m., something involving Camilla's staff, who... I don't know everyone involved, but they have surveillance everywhere. They have weapons. They have access." Marcus processed this quickly. His old training kicked in. "Do you have proof?" Thomas pulled out his phone. Photos, documents, a notebook with dates and times. Marcus took the phone and scrolled through the images. His face grew darker with each one. "This is bigger than I thought," he muttered. "We need to go to MI5 now. Can't trust normal channels. They might be compromised. I have a contact. Direct line. Someone outside the system." Marcus pulled out his own phone. "But we need to move. If they're planning something for 9 p.m., we have less than 8 hours." Thomas nodded. Then a thought struck him. The device. They mentioned a device. In Camilla's study, Marcus's expression changed. "A bomb? I don't know. But they said it would look like an accident. A malfunction. Need to get it out of there before 9 o'clock. But if we go back in, they'll know. They'll change their plans." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Then we don't go back in," he said slowly. "We let them think their plan is working, and we prepare our own surprise." Marcus made the call from his car, driving away from the palace at exactly the speed limit. Nothing to attract attention. Thomas sat in the passenger seat, watching the mirrors for anyone following. "Commander Harrison? It's Marcus Cole. I need an immediate secure meeting. Code Black. Code Black." Thomas had heard of it during training. It meant a threat to the royal family. Direct and immediate. They drove in silence through London's empty streets. Dawn was still hours away. The city slept, unaware that somewhere in the palace, a device was counting down. Marcus pulled into an underground car park beneath a nondescript office building. No signs, no markings, just concrete and shadows. A woman in a dark suit waited by the elevator. She didn't introduce herself, just gestured for them to follow. 3 floors down. Past security doors and silent corridors, they entered a room with no windows. Just a table, chairs, and a single overhead light. Commander Harrison was already there. A man in his 60s, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "You have 5 minutes to convince me this isn't a waste of time," he said. Thomas laid his phone on the table and showed him everything. The photos. The documents. The notebook. Victoria's conversation. The surveillance network. Harrison's expression never changed, but his fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "Do you know what's in Camilla's study?" Thomas asked. "What kind of device?" "Not yet, but I'll find out." Harrison made a call. Spoke in brief coded phrases. Hung up. "There's a scheduled maintenance check at 7 a.m., Harrison said. "Routine environmental system inspection. We'll use that to search for the device. They'll notice," Thomas warned. "They're watching everything. Then we need a distraction. Something that draws their attention elsewhere." Harrison looked at Thomas. "How long until your shift ends?" 2 hours. "Go back. Act normal. If they think you've gone quiet because you're scared for your family, they'll believe the threat worked." Thomas felt his stomach twist. "I sent my family away. Good, but Victoria doesn't know that yet. Let her think she still has leverage." Marcus leaned forward. "What about the people involved? Victoria isn't working alone. I'm running her background now. Phone records, financial records, everything. We'll identify her network." Harrison's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "We have a problem." He turned his phone around. On the screen was a security alert from the palace. Royal Guard Thomas Bennett marked as potentially compromised. All units advised to detain for questioning if spotted. Thomas felt the room spin. They're framing me. Smart move on their part, Harrison said coldly. If you're detained, you can't interfere. And anything you say will seem like the desperate claims of a compromised guard. So what do we do? Marcus asked. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision. Use it. Thomas, you're going underground. Officially, you've fled the palace after being compromised. You're a suspect in whatever they're planning. But it gives you freedom to move. Victoria and her people will think they've won. They'll proceed with their plan. And we'll be waiting. Thomas understood the logic, but it meant his career was over, his reputation destroyed. Everything he'd worked for. My family, he said quietly, already being moved to a secure location. They'll be safe. You have my word. There was no real choice. Not if you wanted to stop whatever was coming at 9 p.m. What do you need me to do? Thomas asked. Harrison pulled out a map of the palace and laid it on the table. Victoria mentioned removing threats to the crown. That means she sees Camilla or her staff as the threat. The device is likely meant to look like an accident during Camilla's evening routine. So we need to change the routine, Marcus said. Exactly. But we can't be obvious about it. If they sense we're onto them, they'll accelerate or change methods. Harrison circled several locations on the map. These are potential alternate targets. Camilla's private dining room, her office, her bedroom. We need eyes on all of them. What about the staff? Thomas asked. The surveillance covered all of them. What if they're targets too? Harrison nodded. Possible. We'll quietly increase security around key staff members. Make it look routine. His phone buzzed again. He answered, listened, then hung up. The maintenance team found it. In the environmental control system for Camilla's study, a modified gas valve. At 9 p.m., it would release carbon monoxide. Slowly. No alarms. By the time anyone noticed, it would be too late. Thomas felt sick. A silent killer? Untraceable unless you knew where to look? Can they disable it? Marcus asked. Already done. But we left it in place. If Victoria checks the system remotely, it'll still look active. So the trap is set, Thomas said. Now what? Now we wait for them to walk into it. Harrison stood. Victoria will want to monitor the situation tonight. Be nearby when it happens. We'll track her movements, identify everyone she contacts. When 9 p.m. comes and nothing happens, they'll realize something's wrong. That's when they'll make mistakes. Thomas checked his watch. It was almost 6 a.m. 15 hours until the planned attack. 15 hours to catch a conspiracy inside the palace walls. There's one more thing, Harrison said. The notebook you found. The handwriting analysis came back. He laid a report on the table. Thomas leaned forward to read it. His heart stopped. The handwriting didn't belong to Victoria Hayes. It belonged to someone much more senior. Someone with access to the highest levels of palace operations. Someone Thomas had trusted completely. The name on the report made everything click into place. The access. The knowledge. The ability to operate undetected for months. We need to move carefully, Harrison said. If this person knows we're onto them, they have the power to shut down our entire investigation. Thomas stared at the name, his mind rewriting everything he thought he knew. How many others? He asked quietly. We're still finding out. But the network is extensive. Guards, staff, even external contractors. All coordinated. All loyal to one goal. Which is... Harrison hesitated. Then he spoke words that changed everything. They believe they're protecting the monarchy from what they see as corrupting influences, from those who threaten tradition. In their minds, they're the real loyalists. Thomas understood now. This wasn't about power or money. It was about belief. Twisted belief, but belief nonetheless. They think they're the heroes, he said. They always do, Harrison replied, which makes them even more dangerous. The woman in the dark suit returned. She whispered something to Harrison. His expression darkened. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "Victoria Hayes has left the palace. We're tracking her now. She's heading toward Westminster." Thomas felt adrenaline spike through him. "That's where Parliament meets. Is there a session today?" Harrison checked his tablet. "Parliamentary committee meeting. This afternoon. Several key figures attending. Camilla is scheduled to appear," the woman added quietly. "Speaking about royal charities." The room went silent. "It was never about the study," Thomas said slowly. "That was a backup plan. The real target is Parliament." Harrison was already on his phone, barking orders. Security alerts. Threat assessments. Emergency protocols. But Thomas's mind was racing ahead. If Victoria was moving, the timeline had changed. They weren't waiting until 9 p.m. anymore. They were moving now. "We need to get to Parliament," Thomas said urgently. "Before Camilla arrives." Harrison shook his head. "You're wanted by palace security. The moment you show up, you'll be detained." "And I need to stay out of sight." "Impossible. The building will be crawling with security." Thomas looked at Marcus. His old mentor met his eyes and nodded slowly. "Not impossible," Marcus said. "Just difficult." Then he made a decision. "You'll have 2 hours. If you can't find Victoria's network by then, we pull the plug and evacuate Parliament. That'll tip them off," Thomas warned. "Better than a dead queen consort," Harrison said coldly. He was right. But Thomas knew if they evacuated too early, Victoria and her conspirators would disappear. They'd try again another day. Another target. Another plan. This was their one chance to end it. Westminster Palace rose against the morning sky like a fortress. Thomas watched from across the Thames, Marcus beside him. They both wore civilian clothes now, just 2 men among the early morning crowds. "Harrison's team is inside," Marcus said quietly. "Plain clothes, scattered throughout the building, but they need to be careful. If Victoria's people are in security positions, they'll spot official agents." Thomas studied the building through binoculars. Multiple entrances. Hundreds of windows. Countless places to hide a threat. His phone buzzed. A message from Harrison. Victoria entered through staff entrance 7:23 a.m., accompanied by 2 others. Male, both identified as palace maintenance staff. "Maintenance," Thomas muttered. "They have access to everything. Ventilation, electrical, plumbing, another gas attack?" Marcus asked. "Maybe. Or something else. Something bigger."
Thomas
Lowered the binoculars. "When is Camilla scheduled to arrive?" "Noon. 3.5 hours. Not much time." Thomas's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Thomas Bennett. A woman's voice. Familiar, but he couldn't place it. "Who is this?" "My name is Sarah Chen. I work in Camilla's office." "I think I know what's happening." Thomas's pulse quickened. "Where are you? Hiding?" "In the Parliament library. I can't go to security. I don't know who to trust." "How did you get my number?" "Victoria? She's been tracking you. I saw your number in her files." "Listen, there's something you need to know about today's event." "Tell me." "The charity speech? It's not just Camilla attending. There are others. Ambassadors, ministers. The American Secretary of State is visiting. They're all gathering in the Royal Gallery." Thomas felt ice in his veins. "How many people?" "Maybe 70. All high profile. All in one room." Marcus was already pulling up a map of Parliament on his tablet. He found the Royal Gallery and showed it to Thomas. A large ceremonial room. High ceilings. Limited exits. Perfect for a trap. "Sarah, can you get out of the building?" Thomas asked. "I don't think so. There are men watching the exits. I saw them checking everyone who leaves." "Describe them." 2 at the main entrance. Both in security uniforms. But they're not regular Parliament security. I've worked here for years. I know all the regular staff. These men are new. Victoria's people. Positioned to control who left and entered. "Stay hidden," Thomas told Sarah. "We're coming to get you." He ended the call and looked at Marcus. We need to get inside. Now. How? You're wanted. I'm retired. Neither of us has authorization, Thomas thought fast. Parliament had service tunnels. Old delivery routes from when the building was originally constructed. He'd learned about them during security training. The river entrance, he said. The old Westminster Tunnel. It connects to the basement levels. That's been sealed for decades. Sealed. Not destroyed. Marcus stared at him. You want to break into Parliament? You have a better idea? They didn't have time for a better idea. 20 minutes later, they were at the river's edge, looking at what used to be a tunnel entrance. Now it was just a bricked-up archway covered in decades of grime and river moss. Marcus pulled tools from his bag. This is insane. Completely, Thomas agreed. They worked quickly. The mortar was old, crumbling in places. Within 15 minutes, they'd removed enough bricks to squeeze through. Inside, the tunnel was dark and wet. Water dripped from the ceiling. The smell of the Thames was overwhelming. Thomas clicked on his flashlight. The beam revealed stone walls and a path leading upward. They moved fast. At the end of the tunnel, ancient stairs climbed into darkness. Thomas counted them as they went. 63 steps. Then a door, locked from the other side. Now what? Marcus whispered. Thomas examined the door. Old wood, iron hinges. But the lock mechanism was visible through a gap in the frame. He pulled out his multi-tool and worked the lock. It took 3 agonizing minutes. The lock clicked. Thomas pushed the door open slowly. Beyond was a storage room. Old furniture covered in dust sheets. No one had been here in years. They crept through the basement level, following service corridors. Every sound echoed. Every shadow could be a threat. Thomas checked his phone. A message from Harrison. Victoria's still on second floor. Eastern wing. 2 companions with her. What are you doing? Thomas typed back. Inside. Moving to Royal Gallery? The response came immediately. Negative. Extract now. Too dangerous. Thomas turned off his phone. He's going to be angry, Marcus said. He'll get over it. They found a service stairwell and climbed. At each floor, Thomas checked carefully before moving on. 3rd floor? 4th floor. The sounds of Parliament grew louder. Voices. Footsteps. The normal bustle of government. Business. They emerged in a maintenance corridor behind the Royal Gallery. Through the wall, Thomas could hear preparations for the event. Staff setting up chairs. Testing microphones. We need to find Sarah, Thomas said. She knows something. Something important enough that she's hiding. The library was 1 floor up. They took another service stair, moving like ghosts through the building's hidden spaces. The library door was locked. Thomas knocked softly. A pattern. 3 short, 2 long. The door opened a crack. A young woman's face appeared. Asian features, frightened eyes. Thomas Bennett. She whispered, "That's me. This is Marcus Cole. Let us in." Inside the library, Sarah led them to a corner behind tall shelves. She pulled out a tablet. "I've been in Camilla's office for 2 years," she said quietly. "Last week I noticed something strange. Schedule changes. Last-minute modifications. Always requested by Victoria Hayes." "What kind of changes?" Marcus asked. "Security details. Which guards would be assigned. Which routes Camilla would take. Small things, but consistent." Sarah pulled up files on her tablet. "Then yesterday, I saw Victoria accessing the building's digital systems, blueprints, ventilation, emergency protocols. Did she see you?" Thomas asked. "I don't think so. But this morning I overheard her on a phone call. She said everything was ready. That by tonight, the corruption would be removed." Thomas and Marcus exchanged glances. "What does she mean by corruption?" Thomas asked. Sarah hesitated. "I've heard rumors. Among some of the older staff, they believe Camilla has too much influence, that she's changing traditions, modernizing things that should stay traditional. Some people are angry about it, angry enough to kill," Marcus said. "I didn't think so. But now?" Sarah's voice trailed off. There's something else. The Royal Gallery. The ventilation system was serviced last week. Emergency repairs, they said. But I checked the maintenance logs. No repairs were scheduled. Thomas felt his blood run cold. Victoria's people did the repairs. What could they have done? Marcus asked. Thomas thought back to the device in Camilla's study. Carbon monoxide. Silent. Invisible. Deadly. The Royal Gallery holds 70 people, he said slowly. All in one room. If they pumped gas into the ventilation system during the event, mass casualty, Marcus finished. And with the American Secretary of State present, it becomes an international incident. That's the point, Sarah said. Make it look like a terrorist attack. Foreign actors. No one would suspect it came from inside. Thomas checked his watch. 11:17 a.m., less than 45 minutes until Camilla arrived. We need to access the ventilation system, he said. Find the device. Disable it. The mechanical room is 2 floors down, Sarah said. But Victoria's people will be watching it. They'll know if anyone goes in. Then we create a distraction, Marcus said. Something big enough to pull them away. Thomas nodded. Fire alarm. Too obvious. They'll know it's fake. What about a real fire? Sarah suggested quietly. They both looked at her. The old document storage room, she said. 3 floors down? It's scheduled for demolition next month. Full of old papers. If a fire starts there, everyone will respond, including Victoria's people. It was risky, but it might work. You'll need to evacuate, Thomas told Sarah. Once the alarm goes off, get out of the building. We'll handle the ventilation system. Then we'll find Victoria. Sarah nodded. She pulled a security card from her pocket. This will get you into the mechanical room. I borrowed it from maintenance weeks ago. I was going to return it, but she shrugged. Thomas took the card. Thank you. You might have saved a lot of lives today. Sarah managed a small smile. Just promise me this ends. No more secret rooms. No more conspiracies. I promise. She left first. Moving quietly through the library, Thomas and Marcus waited 2 minutes, then followed. As they moved through the corridors, Thomas's mind raced through the plan. Start the fire. Wait for the evacuation response. Access the mechanical room. Find and disable the device. Simple, except for the dozens of ways it could go wrong. They reached the old storage room without incident. Inside, stacks of paper and old files filled the space. Decades of parliamentary records waiting to be destroyed. Marcus pulled out a lighter. You sure about this? No, Thomas admitted. But it's the best chance we have. Marcus flicked the lighter and held it to a stack of papers. The flame caught quickly. Within seconds, smoke began to rise. They left the room and moved quickly down the corridor. Behind them, the fire grew. Smoke alarms began to shriek throughout the building. Chaos erupted throughout Parliament. Alarms screamed. People flooded into corridors. Security staff ran toward the fire. Thomas and Marcus moved against the flow, heading down instead of out. The mechanical room was in the basement, away from the evacuation routes. They reached the door. Thomas swiped Sarah's security card. The light flashed green dot inside. The room hummed with machinery. Massive ventilation units. Pipes running in every direction. Control panels lined one wall. Where do we start? Marcus asked. Thomas moved to the control panel. He pulled up the system map. The Royal Gallery's ventilation was on the 3rd floor, but the main controls were here. There, he said, pointing to a section labeled Argivente 1. That's the Royal Gallery intake. They followed the pipes to a large intake unit. Thomas examined it carefully. Everything looked normal at first. Standard filtration. Standard airflow. Then he saw it. A small canister attached to the intake valve. About the size of a soda can. Painted the same color as the pipes. You'd never notice it unless you were looking. A digital timer on the side showed 0 hours 32 minutes and 17 seconds. 32 minutes until it released. Can you disable it? Marcus asked. Thomas studied the device. 2 wires connected it to the valve. A simple mechanism. But simple didn't mean safe. If I cut the wrong wire, it might trigger immediately, he said. And if we don't cut any wire, 70 people die. Thomas pulled out his multi-tool. His hands were steady despite the fear coursing through him. He'd diffused training devices during his security courses. But this was real. This was live. He identified the trigger wire, red, connected to the timer. The release wire was blue. Connected to the canister valve, cut red first. Stop the timer, then disconnect the canister. Thomas positioned the cutting blade on the red wire. Wait, Marcus said suddenly. Thomas froze. What if it's a decoy? What if the real device is somewhere else? Thomas considered this. Victoria was smart. She'd planned for months. Would she rely on a single device? Check the other vents, Thomas said. All the Royal Gallery connections, quickly. Yes. Marcus moved fast, examining each connection point. Thomas kept his blade on the red wire, ready to cut. Here. Marcus called from across the room. Another one. Same setup. Thomas cursed. 2 devices. Maybe more. How many vents feed the Royal Gallery? Marcus asked. Thomas checked the control panel. For separate intake points, which meant for potential devices. They searched frantically. Found the 3rd device behind a cooling unit. The 4th was hidden in a ceiling duct. All 4 showed the same countdown. 0 hours, 29 minutes, and 43 seconds. We can't disable them all in time, Marcus said. Not without triggering one. Thomas's mind raced. There had to be another way. Then it hit him. We don't disable them, he said. We redirect them. He moved to the control panel and pulled up the air routing system. Every vent could be controlled individually. Closed, opened, or redirected. If he closed the Royal Gallery vents and opened exterior vents instead, the gas would be released outside, into open air, where it would disperse harmlessly. His fingers flew across the controls. Closing Argivente 1 through a 4. Opening exterior vents, 17 through X-20. The system updated. New routes established? Will that work? Marcus asked. If Victoria doesn't check the system remotely, if she does, she'll see the changes and know we're on to her. Then we need to find her. Now, before she realizes what's happened. Thomas checked his phone. Multiple messages from Harrison. Victoria, on the move. Heading toward Royal Gallery. Event starting in 15 minutes. They had to go. Had to warn Harrison. Had to stop Victoria before she could adapt. Thomas and Marcus ran through the basement corridors. Up the stairs. The fire alarm was still blaring. People were still evacuating. But Thomas noticed something. Some people weren't evacuating. Some were moving deeper into the building. Toward the Royal Gallery. He counted 6 of them. All men. All moving with purpose. All wearing Parliament security uniforms. Victoria's network. In position for the aftermath. Ready to control the scene once the gas did its work. Thomas pulled Marcus into a side corridor. Those men, he said, they're part of it. They're expecting everyone in the Royal Gallery to be dead or dying. When that doesn't happen, they'll improvise, Marcus finished. With 70 people trapped in one room, they could turn it into a hostage situation. Thomas's phone rang. Harrison, where are you? Harrison demanded. Inside, we found the devices. 4 of them. We've redirected the ventilation. The gas will be released outside, thank God. But we have a bigger problem. Camilla arrived early. She's already in the building. Already heading to the Royal Gallery? Thomas felt his heart stop. Evacuate her now. We're trying. But Victoria is with her. Part of her security detail today? If we move against Victoria now, she might panic. Do something desperate. Thomas was already running. Marcus beside him. They burst into the main corridor. Ahead he could see them. Camilla surrounded by staff and security. Victoria was 3 steps behind her. Right hand in her jacket pocket. Thomas knew that posture. That position, she was armed. Marcus, we need to separate her from the group. Get Camilla away without alerting Victoria, but how? The corridor was full of people. Any sudden move would be noticed. Then Thomas saw Sarah. She'd evacuated like he told her. But now she was coming back in. Moving through the crowd, she saw Thomas and understood immediately. Sarah walked directly into Victoria's path and stumbled, spilling her coffee across Victoria's jacket. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Sarah exclaimed loudly. Victoria stepped back, instinctively brushing at the hot liquid. Camilla's group paused. Security moved to help. In that moment of confusion, Thomas acted. He walked up quickly, showing his palace security credentials to the nearest guard. Change of plans. Commander Harrison needs Her Majesty in the secure room now. The guard, trained to follow orders without question, nodded. He spoke into his radio. Camilla was redirected. Down a different corridor, away from the royal gallery, Victoria realized too late. She turned, looking for Camilla. Saw her being led away. Her eyes found Thomas. Recognition flashed across her face. Then fury, her hand moved in her jacket. Thomas was faster. He closed the distance in 3 steps and grabbed her wrist. "Don't." Victoria struggled, but Thomas was stronger. Marcus was there in seconds, helping restrain her. Other guards responded, surrounding them. Weapons drawn. "She's armed," Thomas said calmly. "And she's behind the plot to gas the royal gallery." Victoria stopped, struggling. She looked at Thomas with something like respect. "You were supposed to be scared," she said quietly. "Supposed to care more about your family than strangers?" "I do care about my family," Thomas said. "That's why I couldn't let you win. What kind of world would I leave them if people like you succeeded?" Security took Victoria away, but Thomas knew she was just one piece. "The others," he said to Marcus. "The 6 men heading to the royal gallery." Victoria's backup. Harrison appeared from the crowd, already on it. "We've been tracking them. The moment Victoria was detained, we moved in. All 6 are in custody? And the devices in the ventilation? Disposal team is removing them now." "It's over, Thomas." But Thomas knew it wasn't quite over. "Not yet. The person who wrote the notebook," he said. "The senior official." "Who was it?" Harrison's expression darkened. "We're still verifying. But the evidence suggests it goes higher than we thought." Over the next 3 hours, as Parliament was secured and statements were taken, the full scope of Victoria's network became clear. 17 people involved. Guards, staff, and 1 senior administrator who'd convinced himself he was protecting the crown by removing its modern influences. All of them believed they were patriots. All of them were wrong. Thomas sat in a quiet office, giving his statement for the 3rd time. His phone buzzed. A message from his wife. "We're safe. Sophie keeps asking when you're coming home. When can you tell us what happened?" Thomas smiled for the first time in what felt like days. Soon, he typed back. "Very soon." Commander Harrison entered the office. He looked exhausted. "You did good work today," Harrison said. "Saved a lot of lives. But you also broke about 20 protocols, trespassed in Parliament, and started a fire in a historic building. I know. Normally that would end your career." Thomas had expected this. "I understand," however, Harrison continued, "given the circumstances. And given that you prevented an assassination attempt on the Queen Consort, we're prepared to overlook the irregularities." Thomas looked up, surprised. "You're being transferred," Harrison said. "New position. Working directly with my team. External threats. Deep cover operations. Interested?" Thomas thought about the secret room in the palace basement, the surveillance network, the months of planning that had gone undetected. How many more are out there? He asked, "How many more networks like Victoria's?" "We don't know," Harrison admitted. "That's why we need people like you. People who don't give up, who see what others miss." Thomas considered his family, the risks, the long hours, the secrets he'd have to keep. But then he thought about what would have happened if he'd walked away. If he'd let fear control his choices. "When do I start?" he asked. Harrison smiled. You already have. 8. Later that evening, Thomas finally returned home. His wife and daughter were waiting. They hugged him tight, asking 100 questions he couldn't fully answer. You saved people today, his wife said quietly. Didn't you? A lot of people, Thomas admitted. That's my dad, Sophie said proudly. A hero. Thomas smiled, but he didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired, grateful, and aware of how close it had all come to disaster. That night, after Sophie was asleep and his wife was dozing beside him, Thomas's phone buzzed one last time. A message from Sarah Chen. Thank you for believing me. For acting when others would have waited. You really did save everyone today? Thomas replied simply. We all did. Together. He set down his phone and closed his eyes. Somewhere in London, an arrest was being made. The senior official who'd started it all was being taken into custody. Somewhere else, evidence was being catalogued. A secret room in a palace basement would be dismantled. Surveillance equipment would be traced. And somewhere, people who'd come within minutes of death were going home to their families, unaware of how close they'd come to never arriving. Thomas Bennett, former palace guard, now something else entirely. Fell asleep knowing that sometimes the greatest battles are the ones no one ever knows were fought. The ones where victory is simply that tomorrow arrives as planned, where people wake up safe, where families stay together, where secrets buried in basement rooms are finally brought into the light, and where one guard's decision to choose courage over fear made all the difference.